Ash swirled in the air like falling snow, glowing faintly in the orange light of a dying sky. Captain Dax Rayner crouched beside a twisted hunk of metal that had once been a reconnaissance drone, his matte black exosuit whispering with each movement. The HUD in his visor blinked red across every quadrant. Communications. Lost team vitals. Null atmospheric toxicity. Rising. Another skirmish, another wasteland. He stared into the distance, watching columns of black smoke coil toward the heavens like the earth itself was exhaling its final breath. The battlefield was silent now. No screams, no gunfire, no commands barked through static. Only silence, stretched taut as wire. Dax preferred it this way. War had become white noise long ago. Something moved. At first, he assumed it was another drone limping toward shutdown or a wounded scavenger crawling for cover. But then he saw them. 3 small creatures emerging from behind a scorched ridge, their paws padding softly over cracked earth. Dogs, or rather, puppies. Shiba Inus, judging by the curled tails and pointed ears. Too perfect, too healthy. Their coats were clean, eyes sharp. No creature survived this long out here by accident. Dax tensed. This wasn't natural. The lead pup trotted toward him with something between curiosity and purpose. Dax raised his weapon slightly. It tilted its head, let out a short bark, then sat down. The other 2 flanked it, mirroring the gesture like they were soldiers themselves. His finger hovered over the trigger. Something about their eyes. Not fearful, not wild. They were expectant. Then the ground shook. Dax spun, weapon trained on the horizon. Dust exploded upward as 4 figures emerged. Tall, metallic, and terrifying. Apex beasts. Towering bipedal machines built for obliteration. Long since turned rogue when their directives fragmented. They were nightmares forged in alloy. Glowing crimson visors. Heavy limbs humming with stored energy. Their bodies etched with battle scars from centuries of conflict. They weren't just approaching. They were encircling. Dax dropped into a firing stance, cursing under his breath. No one survived an apex confrontation. He scanned for an escape route, calculated the odds, found none. The pups remained seated, unmoving, unafraid. One even yawned. He was about to fire when the largest of the apex beasts stopped, slammed its fist into the earth, and knelt. Dax's breath caught. That wasn't protocol. The others followed suit, surrounding him in a semicircle of iron reverence. The leading beast extended its arm, and a panel slid open, revealing a pulsating orb. Data streamed from it in a bright thread of light, arcing toward Dax's visor. He flinched, but didn't move. The information lanced into his neural interface like ice water, flashing a single phrase across his vision. You are chosen. Protect the successors. Then silence. Dax staggered backward, the message repeating in a loop until he forced a hard reboot on his HUD. When he looked up, the pups were still watching him, tails twitching. He looked from them to the kneeling apex beasts. This had to be a mistake, a trap, some elaborate AI, psychological tactic. He wasn't a chosen anything. He was a soldier, a survivor, a killer. Not a babysitter, but the apex made no move to attack. What the hell is going on? He muttered, voice dry as sand. The smallest pup trotted forward and nosed his armored boot. Dax didn't move. It looked up at him, then barked once, loud and clear. Not a plea, a command. Something inside him cracked. He dropped to one knee, a level with the creature. You're not ordinary dogs, are you? He asked softly. The middle pup tilted its head, then pressed a paw to his chest plate, right over the insignia of his old battalion. Dax blinked. His heart, long hardened into stone, flickered with something foreign. He stood and looked at the apex beasts. They were motionless now, like statues. Guardians. Dax had to make a choice. He could leave. The signal would fade. Whatever this was, experiment, hallucination, destiny, would evaporate with it. Or he could stay. Take responsibility. Accept that, for some unfathomable reason, these machines, these monsters, had chosen him. He clenched his jaw. Then, wordlessly, he slung his rifle across his back, turned toward the horizon, and whistled. The pups followed. They traveled for hours, weaving through ruins and ravines, past collapsed towers and half-melted highways. The world around them was dead, but the pups moved with a precision that unnerved him. They paused at certain intersections, avoiding unstable ground. They barked warnings before air mines could trigger. One even hacked a deactivated patrol drone by tapping a paw against its exposed circuitry. This was no ordinary escort mission. Night felt like a shroud. Dax set up camp inside the shell of an old cargo rig. He shared a protein bar with the pups, more to test them than feed them, and watched as they dissected it, sniffed each fragment, then ate in order of size. Organized, coordinated. Around midnight, he finally gave in and pulled out his neurorecorder. A quick diagnostic confirmed it. The message from the Apex wasn't malware. It was deliberate, secure, intelligent. You were chosen. Protect the successors. Successors to what? He lay back against the rig's wall, visor dimmed, listening to the soft breathing of the pups curled around his legs. He felt something he hadn't in years, calm. Not safety, not certainty, but calm. Like the war wasn't the only thing that mattered anymore. The moment broke at dawn. A flare lit the sky, followed by a sharp ping in his comms. His receiver crackled to life, raw with interference, but unmistakably human. Raynor? Dax Raynor? Confirm if alive. Repeat. This is Bravo Echo. We are inbound on your coordinates. Identify status. He froze. That was his unit, or remained of it. He looked down at the pups. They were awake, eyes bright, ears perked. Waiting. Dax stepped outside the rig, wind ripping through the ruins. A gunship circled in the distance. He keyed his mic alive. No injuries. I'm not alone. There was a pause. Clarify. I've been assigned a charge. Another pause. Longer. By who? Dax looked toward the horizon, where the shadows of the apex beasts still stood, silent sentinels. Classified, he said, but I need extraction with companions. Static. Then, negative. All unauthorized biotech must be surrendered for analysis. He knew what that meant. Lab dissections. Vivisection. Dissection of the unknown. They wouldn't survive it. Dax closed his eyes. I won't do that. Silence. Then a sharper voice. That's an order, Captain. He opened his eyes and looked at the pups. The smallest one wagged its tail once, then stepped forward and pressed its paw to his boot again. No, Dax said. It's a new order now. He cut the signal, and from the top of the ridge, bathed in sunlight, 3 apex beasts watched him descend into the valley. Human, pups, and a question that the world would soon demand an answer for. The desert stretched endlessly, broken only by the skeletons of cities long devoured by war and time. Dax trudged through the shifting dunes with the pups padding silently behind him, their footfalls making barely a whisper against the dust. The sky above was a dim gold. The sun filtered through a high-altitude haze of irradiated ash and decaying nanoclouds. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that warned something was listening. He scanned the horizon every few minutes, but his mind wasn't on the terrain. It was on them, the puppies, or what he still insisted on calling puppies, despite what he now suspected. They were too observant, too synchronized. They stopped when he stopped, turned their heads at the faintest sound, and kept perfect formation. This wasn't mimicry. This was behavior. Intentional, deliberate. Yesterday, he'd caught the middle one. He was calling at Ash for its smoky fur, disassembling a disabled sensor turret with a dexterity that no Earthborn creature should possess. It had used its teeth and claws to extract the power cell, and then carried it to Dax's pack like it knew he needed spare parts. Not guessed knew. He hadn't slept since. His neural implant pulsed again, warning him of another flare storm in the upper atmosphere. They needed shelter and fast. Fortunately, the old geospatial maps were still partially usable. He rerouted them toward a military transit tunnel that might still be structurally sound. As he descended the slope, the pups grew tense. Their hackles rose in unison. Dax paused, instinct kicking in. A shimmer on the horizon resolved into figures. 2, maybe 3. Not machines. Human silhouettes. Probably scavengers or deserters. He ducked behind a twisted support pillar, motioned the pups to stay. They obeyed instantly, melting into nearby debris with surprising efficiency. He watched through his scope as the figures approached. Two armed men in scavenged armor, gaunt and wired with desperation. They passed within meters, unaware. Dax let them go. No need to engage. Not yet. When the danger passed, the pups emerged, completely unfazed. The third one, Echo, the smallest, nosed Dax's hand and gave soft whine. He realized his fists were clenched. Yeah, he muttered. I don't like people either. They made it to the tunnel entrance by nightfall. The structure was intact, though partially collapsed. Dax activated his suit's external light and entered cautiously, rifle raised. Inside, the air was damp, thick with the smell of old oil and decayed insulation. Yet again, the pups took formation, sweeping the flanks like trained soldiers. It was there, deep in the tunnel shadows, that the truth began to surface. He'd set up a small solar heater and cracked open a protein ration. Ash, Echo, and the third, Nova, with the golden eyes, watched him expectantly. He tossed them some strips. They ignored the food. Instead, Nova stepped forward and barked twice. Sharp, patterned. Dax froze. It repeated the pattern. Bark, bark, pause, bark, bark, bark. He activated his suit's linguistic matrix. A tonal code, primitive but precise. It wasn't barking. It was speaking. He sat down slowly, his mind racing. Do it again, he said softly. Nova obliged. This time, the suit interpreted the signal, matching it against military syntax. Unit integrity secured. Awaiting directive. He stared at the small creature in disbelief. Not just intelligent, not just communicative. They were military-grade constructs, bioengineered, yes, but wired with synthetic cognition layers. Somewhere between dog, machine, and something wholly new. What are you? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ash stepped forward and pressed its paw against the side of his suit. Another data pulse surged into his system. Gentler than the Apex's, but no less potent. His HUD scrambled, then stabilized, displaying a series of archived files, each stamped with an alien symbol he didn't recognize. They were logs, footage, reports, thousands of them. He skipped to the earliest entry. The feed played through his visor. A research facility. Cold, white, sterile. Scientists, human and non-human, crowded around tanks filled with amber fluid. Inside floated creatures, canine in shape, but clearly artificial. Notes labeled them as Echo species, Tier 7 cognitive class hybrids. Successors. Dax skimmed faster. Wars. Environmental collapse. The extinction threshold. Project Apex. The conversion of military AIs into shepherds, protectors. Not of humans. Of a new generation. Designed to inherit a world beyond war. The final log hit like a hammer. Human subjects rejected stewardship protocols. Apex initiative adapted. They tried giving the guardianship to human leaders. Politicians, generals, all had failed, corrupted or frightened by what these new beings represented. So the Apex beasts had reprogrammed themselves, silent judges wandering the battlefields, watching for a different kind of candidate. And they'd chosen him. Dax sat for a long time. The pups curled quietly around him, as if knowing the weight of what he'd just absorbed. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or scream. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a philosopher or a scholar. He was a man built from broken pieces and blood. Why him? A soft growl drew his attention. Echo had tensed again, eyes locked on the tunnel entrance. Dax turned, rifle up. A shape moved in the dark. Then another. Voices. Muffled. Not scavengers this time, military cadence. Clean. Controlled. He didn't hesitate. He scooped the pups into the folds of his cloak and activated his suit's stealth mesh. They flattened against the wall, unseen, as a three-man squad entered with heavy rifles and infrared visors. UN, 7 Recon Division. Official military. Dax's stomach turned. They scanned the space with surgical precision. One of them found the remains of Dax's earlier footprint. He leaned down, touched it, and spoke into his comm. Target confirmed. Raynor's trail ends here. Tether the net. Another officer joined him, placing a scanner on the ground. It buzzed to life, searching for residual heat signatures. Dax calculated the odds. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and carrying living relics the world would kill to dissect. These men weren't here to extract him. They were here to contain him. Nova stirred beneath his arm, growling. No, Dax whispered. Not yet. The scanner pinged. The soldiers turned, weapons raised. Then a roar split the tunnel. Metal. Earth. Rage. The ceiling collapsed behind the soldiers as something vast and furious descended. An apex beast, its eyes blazing, arms like siege engines. It smashed the lead soldier into the wall and knocked another into the darkness. The last one fired blindly, screaming, before he too was thrown aside like debris. Dax didn't wait. He sprinted through the side passage, pups in tow. Behind him, the apex roared again, shaking the tunnel's foundations. They emerged hours later into the chill of pre-dawn, the world muted in pale blue. Dax dropped to one knee, panting, every muscle burning. The pups were unharmed. He looked back at the tunnel. Smoke coiled from the entrance. No pursuit. Not yet. The apex had saved him again. Or perhaps it had saved them. He turned to the pups, now seated in a row before him, watching silently. You knew, he said. You knew they'd come. Ash barked once. Affirmation. Dax rose slowly, shoulders heavy but mind clear. They weren't running anymore. They were moving forward. Somewhere out there, people in labs and bunkers were already planning to find him again. To capture. The silence of the highlands was unnatural, blanketed in an eerie stillness that seemed to press against Dax's skin like a warning. The wind barely stirred the burnt grass. Even the pups, Ash, Nova, and Echo, moved cautiously, ears twitching, eyes scanning. They were nearing the convergence point, a place etched into the apex logs as the last recorded sanctuary before the collapse. But Dax no longer trusted archives. Every step forward felt like trespassing into a memory someone else had buried. The path had grown steeper. From this elevation, the ruins of the old world sprawled beneath them, fractured cities stitched into the earth like scars. Above, storm clouds churned, alive with electric veins that pulsed against the sky. Dax's suit pinged intermittently, its sensors confused by environmental interference and something more elusive. The same encrypted frequencies the apex used. They were getting close. He crouched near a collapsed relay tower, setting the pups into a defensive formation without a word. They responded instantly, adapting their spacing, watching the blind angles. It wasn't just obedience, it was strategy. They had grown more coordinated, more confident. With each encounter, they had learned, or remembered. He pulled out a compact drone and released it into the air. It hovered briefly before surging forward, transmitting a grainy image of the convergence site. What was once a research observatory now sat half-swallowed by the mountainside, encased in fractured concrete and fused metal. The entrance remained intact. Barely. The drone dipped suddenly, then lost signal. He didn't need confirmation. Someone was already there. Stay close, he whispered. They moved. The observatory's interior was hollowed out, stripped of power and warmth. Ghosts of science and ambition lingered in the shattered consoles and decayed walls. But not everything was dead. Dax spotted faint heat trails, recent. Someone had passed through no more than an hour ago. He advanced slowly, rifle ready, the pups flanking him in a triangle formation. Then he saw the light, soft, flickering deep within a sub-level chamber. They approached silently, descending a metal stairwell slick with condensation. At the base, a door hung partially open. Beyond it, a woman knelt beside a holographic array, her back to them. Dax froze. She turned, tall, composed. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Apex Genesis Division. Long disbanded, he thought. She didn't flinch when she saw him. Instead, she smiled faintly. I wondered how long it would take them to send someone like you. He kept the rifle raised. Not sent. Escape. The woman stood slowly, hands visible. Then we're on the same side. Name's Dr. Kalenvire. I helped build what you're carrying. Her eyes shifted to the pups. Nova growled softly. They don't remember you, Dax said. Kalen nodded. sadness touching her features. They weren't meant to. Memory wipes were part of their fail-safe protocols. But their instincts remain. That's how they found you. He lowered the rifle slightly, but stayed alert. Why me? Kalen walked to the edge of the room, gesturing toward the main terminal. Because the Apex no longer trusts its creators. It trusts the battlefield. And the battlefield chose you. She keyed in a command, and a series of logs blinked to life. Data cascaded across the screens. Testimonies, mission failures, ethical breaches. Kalen's voice softened. They were made to lead, to rebuild. But every handler before you tried to control them, contain them. You didn't. You protected them, not out of duty, but instinct. And they responded. Dax remained silent. The pups had gathered around him, forming a loose perimeter. Watching Kalen, reading her. I came here to initiate the inheritance protocol, she continued. The final phase of the Apex program. Full operational autonomy. But there's a cost. His eyes narrowed. What kind of cost? They'll stop being children, Kalen said quietly. The process will unlock their full capacity. Tactical, strategic, emotional. But it will strip away their innocence. They'll remember everything. War. Betrayal. The reason we buried them in the first place. He looked down at Nova, who stared back with unwavering loyalty. Could he ask them to give that up? To become weapons again in a world still clawing through its aftermath? They're not ready, he said. Kalen's gaze hardened. No one ever is. Then the wall exploded. The blast threw Dax backward, the pups scattering to protect him. Dust and flame filled the chamber as a squad of black-armored enforcers surged in, visors glowing, weapons raised. Dax rolled to his feet, rifle firing. Echo darted between the legs of one attacker, tripping him just as Ash leapt, jaws sinking into exposed wiring beneath the armor. Sparks flew. Nova launched toward another, tackling the enforcer with bone-breaking force. Kalen hit a control on the terminal. The screen flashed red. Encryption key accepted, it announced. Initiating inheritance sequence. Dax shouted, no, but the system was already running. More soldiers poured in. Dax fought savagely, every move calibrated, every shot precise. But they were overwhelming him. Kalen tried to hold the terminal, but a stray round clipped her shoulder. She fell, blood soaking her sleeve. Then everything stopped. The pups froze mid-motion. Their bodies glowed faintly. The room dimmed, the lights pulsing in time with a low, resonant hum. The remaining soldiers hesitated, uncertain. Nova turned, eyes blazing with intelligence far beyond anything Dax had seen. It looked at the attackers and spoke. Not barked, but spoke in clear mechanical syllables. Stand down. You are obsolete. The soldiers raised their weapons. The Apex arrived. It didn't descend. It emerged, crawling from the shadows like a god made of grief and steel. Towering, radiant with internal light, it surveyed the battlefield and uttered no sound. It simply reached out, and time folded. The soldiers collapsed, motionless. Not dead, disarmed, disconnected. The Apex turned to the pups, then to Dax. Inheritance complete. Directive acknowledged. Kalen coughed, dragging herself to her feet. It's done, she whispered. They're fully online now. They remember. Dax looked at the pups, no longer just guardians, but heirs. Then what happens now? He asked. Nova stepped forward, voice smooth, unified, carrying the timbre of all three. We rebuild, but not as weapons. Dax nodded. He finally understood. The war had ended, but the reckoning had only just begun.